All right, in this demo, we are going to start adding some images. Finally, probably, you say. Okay, well, let's go ahead and we're going to start just by fooling around with this banner image up at the top. And I'm going to go into my header and, looking at this in my group, one of the things now that I've got so many objects and layers and stuff inside of these folders, that something that's bothering me is that now my layer panel is kind of busy and confusing looking. And if you're not aware of this, one of the things that you can also do is I'm going to right click, let's say on the header, and I can add a color so that now my header layer group is all red, whatever colors you want to deem suitable. In fact, let's just say that I'm going to make that one blue, and then who we are, maybe that one can be yellow. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just color code these real fast. Let's go into our header and let's look there. So the header stuff is blue, so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on now. So I'm going to place an image in this area. Well, what's nice is that we already have a vector drawn there, so it's not like I'm going to have to necessarily go and create a layer mask. Let me show you a little trick. Let me go ahead and select this background banner image, because if I select the correct layer, it'll put it right up on top of that, as opposed to just randomly sticking it at the top of the header where I'm going to have to move it anyway. So I'm going to select the BG banner image, and I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to say Place Linked. Okay, so and then this is what you're going to want to do is if you go into that Werner Mitchell web folder that you've created, and then you look in the resource image files folder that I gave you, you should have downloaded that and unzipped it and stuck it in your folder. Then inside of there, you're going to find some high resolution images called high res images. And inside of that, I'm going to find the file that's called structural.jpg, and I'm going to place that. And you see that it's this giant object. I could scale this, but actually, I could make it bigger, I could make it smaller, however I want. But, I actually think I might kind of like it like this. I don't know, let's just say that maybe that's where I want it, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and the problem is that, now you see that it's taking up an awful lot of space, and really I want it to only take up the space that's in the blue. So one of the things that I can do that's kind of cool is I can option, if I go and put my mouse or my cursor right in between the structural smart object and this BG banner image, the BG banner image, if I click while holding down the option, what happens is the BG banner image will become a clipping mask. It's really wonderful, actually, because we already have everything drawn out specifically based on our grid. And you might look at this and go, well, I don't really like the placement of that. Well, no worries. You just select your structural layer, and then you can choose the move tool. And let's just say that you want to move that up. It's just like a sort of like a layer mask, right? So you can do that. Now, there's some different things that you could do too if you wanted to add, like some sort of adjustment to that. One of the things that you could do is you could choose structural, and you could start to use like different filters, layer filters on these, and you could work with like multiply, for instance. You could lower the opacity if you wanted to have it sort of dimmer, and that's going to dim out the whole thing. You could try some other stuff too, all these different filters. I always really suggest that you try using these layer filters just to see what's going to happen, because sometimes you can get like super cool effects that you never would have expected, anyway. And I'm not going to sit here and go through every single one of these. This is something that you need to explore. And one that's actually kind of interesting, like also, is the difference if you want to get the reverse of the image. I mean, that's crazy for what we're doing, but I really suggest that you explore every single one of these to make sure you understand what it's going to do, because sometimes it can just produce something that is like so cool that you never would have expected it to. And if I really thought, hey, we have like something that's sort of like an outrageous design firm, that might be kind of cool right there, because it actually works within our color scheme, within our W and M logo. And You know, but for me, for this, it's a little too much. These are interior design architects, because this is also going to make a statement about what their aesthetic is. And maybe this is a little bit too dramatic. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe out the changes that I made by going back up here to normal. And I'm also going to put the opacity back up to 100. Now, something that you could also do is you could take this banner image, you could duplicate this, and what it does is it breaks that constraint, it adjusts it. And so I could put that on top. So if I wanted to go back here and make structural by, clip it by using this BG banner image, the original one, I can do my option click in between. And now I've got this BG banner on top. So something that you could do is, now with that, if you like that color blue and you want to be do something a little simpler, you could also just lower the opacity just by having, just a shape on top with a lower opacity. And that's actually pretty nice. Now, I'm going to rename that, and I could call it BG banner image color. Now, if I don't like that, I could play around with something else too. I'm going to turn off the visibility. And this is me just showing you how to experiment in a variety of different ways. Now, the thing is that the structural image is actually quite lovely, but one of the things that we can also do is we can open it up in through Adobe Bridge and do camera raw stuff. So I want to show you, I already have Bridge open here. And if you go into Bridge, and you'll see on the left, if you've never used Bridge, hopefully you have if you're in this course, you have like your file navigator over here on the left, and I've already navigated in my file system into that high-res images folder, and here's my structural file right here. One of the things that you can do to open something up in Camera Raw and do non-destructive modifications is that you go up here, and there's this little sort of almost looks like a volleyball kind of thing, but or if you're a photographer, it looks like an aperture. Anyway, so I'm going to click on this, and it opens the image up in Camera Raw. Now, there are lots of things that you can do in Camera Raw, and I'm just going to kind of cover some things with some images and others with other images. But if you want to see how you can play around with this, we can, and just zoomed out by the way, we can work with this file a little bit and just mess around in different ways. So up here I've got a bunch of different tools, and if you hover over, it'll show you some different options. Now you have a crop tool built right in, which is awesome. But it doesn't destructively crop your image, which is really great. So if I wanted to go and crop from here, I could, but it wouldn't actually destroy the file. Now there's also something where you can straighten it. So if you have something that's slightly crooked, you can do that too. So let's just select this, and if I wanted to draw, I'd draw something out, and then I can kind of mess around with this, and let's say that I had a portrait face or something, or if I want something a little bit skewed here, I could. I don't really have that as an issue with this file. I'm just going to hit escape because I'm not really interested in doing that. But you can see how you can kind of play with these different tools up here. Now, one of the things that I do want to show you is this graduated filter, which is kind of cool. So if I click and hold, I can, just draw something straight down, and you see how it starts to literally have like an alpha sort of effect. And depending on how far up I drag this, I'm holding down Shift to constrain it too. I can also pull it down, if I want the effect to be more dramatic. I can skew it if I want, so that it skews it off to the edge of the image. I wouldn't necessarily want to do it that on something so symmetrical like as this is. And then I can also move this so that it's like dead center since it's so symmetrical. And then I can play around with the temperature. I can so make this like a really warm filter, and I could tint it with some other color. So it's sort of a greener color. If I want it to be more in the orange and reds, I can go up. Anyway, and the exposure is really high. I could also darken it so that it's sort of like a dark and brooding image. There are lots of different things that you can do. And remember, this is non-destructive. And I can also add, if I want to add, noise reduction, like if you need to reduce that. And there are lots of different things you can do. And what's, you know, you can look at this as an overlay or not, so you can see it without the overlay, how the image is going to look. And let's say that we kind of like, let's actually, I'm going to zoom out a little bit to like down to 12%, so then I can drag my filter down further and then move this down a little bit. And then it covers more of the image, and then I can go back up and I can say fit and view. All right, and then we have, you know, I can make the overlay go away. All right, so let's say that we like that graduated filter. You can also do something with a radial filter as well. This isn't really an image that would be good for a radial filter, so I'm not going to use it. And let's say that we're kind of happy with that change, just that alone. Let's just go ahead and click on done, and you see how it kind of visually changed right here in Bridge. Now let's jump over to Photoshop. And notice I didn't even save the image. It automatically updated that for me. That's very cool. And then, you know, if I wanted to move this image, I could still move it and see how, you know, some other part of it looked. Oops, I just moved the wrong thing actually. Let's see. Let's move structural. That's what I want to look at. And if I can move that inside, and you see how it sort of fades out. And then, you know, if I wanted to make this bigger, I also could do that, because this image is so huge. It's actually 300 ppi. Let's just see what happens. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So let's go down here and let's do this at like maybe 30% of the screen. And what I can do is I can go to edit, and I can transform and scale. So it's going to allow me to scale my smart object. So if I want to make this much, much bigger, oops, I can. And I'm going to click and hold Shift Option so that it scales like this. And I can, you know, scale it like up to here, let's say. And then now I've got this other structural looking framework, which is kind of cool too. So you can really play around with this in a lot of different ways. And then if I wanted, I could also add color, adjustment layers to this. And, you know, however you want to do this, it really, let's just say that I add another adjustment layer. Let's do hue saturation, I guess. And it's going to add that layer up on top. And if I do colorize, it's going to colorize. Let me show you something now. It's going to colorize the whole thing if I do it like that. But let's say here, first of all, let's say that we do a different color, like somewhere in maybe in here, and let's just be done with that. Now I've got this hue saturation, but as I said, it's going everywhere. Well, what I can do here is I can drag that down inside of this change, and now what it's doing is it's applying that saturation also to this clipping mask. Okay, so that's another option that you can do as well. And then if I wanted on this one through the view, the hue saturation, I could even still yet go and play around. Oops, not with that, sorry, my bad. I picked the wrong one. I could still go and play around with this, and it would actually have now a totally different effect because it has that hue saturation applied to it. So the options, as I said, are limitless. Now, let's say that I decided I really didn't like that, and I could either go in my history or I could just remove it. So let's do that. Let's just go into up in here, and there. Now we're at the free transform, and hue saturation's gone. But let's say that I really didn't like this. Let's say that I really didn't care at all for the change that I made in Camera Raw. Well, what's really cool is that I can go jump back into Bridge, and you see this little icon right here. It shows in the top of the thumbnail. That means that it has a Camera Raw setting applied to it. So if I right-click on that, I can just go down to Develop Settings, and I could just say Clear Settings, or Copy Settings, or Camera Raw Defaults. I can go straight back to the defaults if I don't want it to remember my last defaults, defaults that I used before I made these settings. So let's just go back to Camera Raw Defaults. And I can also go here, and I can say Clear Settings. I can do that too. And you see over here, it shows me, it goes back to the original image. If I jump back over into Photoshop now, it automatically updates it. That's the beauty of using smart objects with really high resolution image files.